Football at 4, John McMullen talks NFL with us. The Eagles have made a lot of moves. We're going to dive into them, break them down. I think some of them could be centered on landing a big fish. Is that possible when we look at the moves Howie Roseman has made? Lane Johnson. They have a restructuring of his contract. You know, this is interesting. Like, they restructured his contract. He was going to make X amount of million. Now he's going to make $805,000 this year. The update on the move, it creates $8.2 million in cap space. Jason Kelce's extension, creating $4 million in cap space. A lot of flexibility all of a sudden for the Philadelphia Eagles, John. What does that signal to you?
Well, they're obviously creating space with some moves in mind, so it's going to be interesting. I think if you look at what Howie Roseman said at the Combine, it's about sort of paying your players and then using free agency as an accentuation to that. They've already started that, obviously, with Brandon Graham extending Jason Kelce. Starting to pick up some steam. I hear there may be more interest in Ronald Darby than we first expected. I think that will depend largely on the market and how it develops and whether people want to pay him like a true cornerback one or the injury comes into play and they can get him a little bit cheaper. So I think the plan is to take care of the players you've developed and have been a part of the Super Bowl winning team and sort of pick and choose and fill in from there.
Yeah, I mean, when it seems like they're kind of trying to get really creative and doing a lot of things here to, clear out as much space as possible. Anybody in mind?
Well, as far as free agency, I don't think it's going to be splashy. I don't think it's going to be Le'Veon Bell. I do think they want to add a deep threat at receiver. You look at a guy like John Brown, I pointed out from Baltimore, used to be in Arizona, can really, really run. He would make a lot of sense. We've talked a lot about running back. Guys like Tevin Coleman, Mark Ingram, they would make a lot of sense in that third safety position. There's so many safeties on the market, there's going to be a bargain somewhere. They're not going to bring in Earl Thomas or Landon Collins, but Adrian Phillips, somebody like that from the Chargers, who's a good player and can fit in that third role that's so important for Jim Schwartz. I think those are the types of players you're looking at.
Yeah, Weddle, any interest there?
Well, he's an interesting case because he's 34. I mean, typically
as maybe the Graham spot.
Yeah, it would be nice. The difference is, though, Eric's an interesting player because he's a lot like he's a very smart player, and I'm surprised Baltimore's moving on because of the way they used him. And he lined up all across the field. He's very intelligent. As I said, he enabled them to do a lot of different things on the defensive side for what was the number one defense in the NFL last year. So I'm a little bit surprised they moved on. It's an age thing. He still thinks he's a starter. I don't think he would accept that third role. And I think there's a little bit of redundancy because his role is sort of what Malcolm Jenkins does. And you want more of just a covered safety who can come in and play that type of football when Malcolm is moving all around. So I don't necessarily think he's a fit.
He's a veteran guy, by the way. Eric Weddle, Baltimore released the other day, so obviously people perking up on that. Anytime there's an interesting name out there. They're the Lane Johnson thing, they convert his money from salary to bonus money or something like that?
Yeah, they essentially almost all of it. He was due $10.8 million, so about $10 million of that was converted into a signing bonus. That they can spread out over the length of the contract. So it's a win-win. Lane gets all his money up front, and the Eagles can spread out that money over the final years of the contract, which runs through 2021. So instead of having that $15 million cap hit, they save about just over $8 million. So these are kind of tricks of the trade, and what happens every year. And I'll give Jeff Mosher credit because he chided me. So our friend, he tweeted it first, and I do think it's important to people to realize, when we talk about salary cap, understand everybody has to get a salary cap. Everybody. I mean, you have to by next Wednesday. So it's no surprise the Eagles are doing this. The real issue is the decisions you make to get to that point, because all 32 teams got to do it. It's not like a surprise they're doing it. So the real questions are later, and have you made the right decisions? Do you make the right signings? Do you extend the right people? Do you restructure the right people? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, John, and they've done a lot of these things where they've just kind of changed, some things around. Well, my question was somebody asked me this, and I don't really know it. Why don't more teams do this? I mean, are they not player-friendly to have the smaller contract and just give them more money up front and manipulate the cap that way? I mean, why don't you see that more?
Oh, no, it happens all over the league. Now, there's different teams in different circumstances. For instance, I always put up the two teams with the most money right now are Indianapolis and the Jets. They both have over $100 million, so they don't have to do that. Now the Jets, it makes sense because they're a really bad team. Now you're Indianapolis, you're coming off a great year. You got Frank Reich, he's getting you in the playoffs. Andrew Luck's healthy again. You say to yourself, you're in cap heaven. They got a chance to be a Super Bowl contender if they make the right decision. But every team in this league restructures deals. You'll see it in Jacksonville. They have to restructure and do some things before they bring in Nick Foles. No matter what they sign Nick to, whether it's over $20 million, $18 million, whatever it ends up being,
right,
they're going to have to do some things. This kind of thing happens all over the league, where I will say the Eagles are a little bit different. Is they're a little bit more proactive than most people. And you see that with sort of the Isaac Seumalo deal would be the best example of that. They like him as a player. They think he turned the corner. They extend him early. And by doing that, they save a little bit. And then if they waited to the last moment. So that's generally where they're ahead of most teams. But restructures, that kind of stuff happens all over the league.
Yep. And we're talking with John McMullen here at JF McMullen. The Eagles making a lot of their moves. Graham is back. Seumalo is back. Kelsey is back. We now see Lane Johnson getting the restructured deal. So you think Howie has anybody else getting the tap on the shoulder?
Oh, sure.
Who else is a candidate?
A lot of it. There's a lot of them. Jason Peters, obviously, is a big candidate, and they have to make a decision by March 13th. So next Wednesday on Jason Peters, it'll be interesting. I don't think they want to keep him at $13 million. I don't think they want to cut him. So he would be a candidate for a restructure. Nelson Aguilar, we've talked about. I'm pretty sure the Eagles don't want to pay him his fifth-year option, which is just over $9 million. So he'd be coming off his rookie deal like Isaac. He'd be a candidate for an extension because I do think they want to keep him. I think Stefan Wisniewski's an interesting name mainly because they believe now that Seumalo's the starter at left guard. But remember, Brandon Brooks is coming off the Achilles injury. He's not going to be around for the offseason. Do you want that insurance policy? Do you want to trade him? There were reports they were shopping him for a seventh-round pick. They could cut him for a little bit extra salary cap space. So a lot of dominoes still left to fall.
Seemingly, yes. And then there's a lot of other, big things that could happen, including Antonio Brown, which, According to some reports, including Ann Rappaport and Adam Schefter, sources say the Steelers have begun telling teams that this is moving quickly and to give them their best offers. I don't know how much that interview where he looked like he looked to be disheveled a little bit on that interview on ESPN. I mean, he did not look great.
Well, and he's said some crazy things, and there's been a lot of off-the-field stuff. I mean, there's a reason. There hasn't been a more productive receiver in football, and the Steelers have to move on, they feel, from their perspective because of some of the issues with Ben Roethlisberger and his ability, and he wants out of that organization. And it looks, at least if you believe the rumors, that the Raiders might trade one of their first-round picks for Antonio Brown. And it'll be interesting if that happens because you know how much criticism John Gruden got for what he did last year, trading Khalil Mack, trading Antonio Brown, but trading, Amari Cooper. But if you fast forward, and, people are very impatient, as we know, all of a sudden, if the Raiders get an Antonio Brown, with some of the capital they got from those trades, if they're able to get an edge rusher under a rookie deal and wants one of the deepest drafts for edge rushers you've ever seen, all of a sudden, those trades, people may mock them, but long-term might not be quite as bad as it looked.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Steelers and you're asking for a first-round pick and you don't get it, all right, then what?
Well, I think
is that a fair question to ask? Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, I think if you go back a week to 10 days ago, everybody in this league thought there was no way they were going to get a first-round pick because of his contract demands. He wants a new contract. He wants to extend it and get more guaranteed money, and plus his behavior on top of it. So there was a lot of speculation that this ultra-productive wide receiver wouldn't get more than a mid-round pick. And here we are on the verge. It looks like it's going to be done this week, and people are talking about a first-round pick. So things change pretty quickly. I think generally if you say to the casual fan, Antonio Brown's going to get traded, they would expect a first-round pick. But there's a lot more that goes into it, and there always is. And we just ran down the salary and the behavior and the off-the-field stuff. And you brought up the disheveled, and there's concerns there. But the Raiders are the Raiders, and they do some goofy things, seemingly back to the days of Al Davis, that other teams don't do.
Yeah, and I have a list of odds here that have come out about which teams that Vegas at least thinks, and Oakland is at the top of that list. The next team would be Tennessee. Do you see any way they deal them within the division?
No, I don't think anybody. I think from the things I've heard today, I've been texting with a few people, I think the Raiders are betting against themselves. I don't think anybody else is involved. I think he's going to be traded to the Raiders, and that's how it's going to end. Tennessee could certainly use that kind of talent at the wide receiver position, would certainly help Marcus Mariota, but we always know how these odds are done, and people look at teams who need receivers, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're interested in the top receiver on the market for a lot of reasons. And those odds generally don't take into account those different things, and it's really, as I said, it comes down to Oakland and everybody else.
Yeah, another team on the list, Arizona, Green Bay, Cleveland, Indianapolis, and just for your entertainment purposes, Philadelphia 25-1. So it doesn't seem that they are in the conversation when it comes to Antonio Brown, even though you said they would look for a deep threat.
No, yeah, they're not going to be in that business, and Arizona's already tapped out, so you can throw them out as well. But yeah, the Eagles. The Eagles are always in those types of odds with any player because the Eagles do a lot of different things, and Howie Roseman is famous for trading more than any other general manager in this league. So anytime a player comes available, you mentioned Eric Weddle before, you can throw Jamie Collins in the mix, who got cut today as well. The Eagles are always going to be that last team at 25-1 or something like that because they do so many different things.
Are you intrigued by their odds for Bell?
I am, because that's a need. And
I feel I feel they're more on Bell than you feel.
Yeah, I don't think they're on him. To me, it comes down to Le'Veon Bell and his mindset. Now, and I talk about this all the time.
Your reasoning I agree with, though, but I feel like they're restructuring and doing some stuff, and it almost has that, like, hey, they got Bryce Harper, they've got Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler over there. Like, we're the Eagles, man.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I kind of buy that because this team does.
If you're going to buy a jersey now, if you're going to buy an Eagles jersey, I already got a Wentz jersey. I already got a Jeffrey jersey. I need a new jersey to put on the rack, man.
Yeah, they like to be on the back page, the old term. They like to be on the back page of the paper. They don't like to be pushed off. I think that's true. And I think they were pushed off a bit by Bryce Harper. Ultimately, though, I think, it's pretty clear doesn't matter what happens. That's the number one team in this market.
Yeah, no, I still think Wentz is the biggest star in the city, but he hasn't played in any of the biggest games that they've had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think the Eagles. It's not that I think the Eagles would love Le'Veon Bell. It's not that.
But you don't think these moves are trying to put themselves at least at the table? By the way, the odds for Bell are 15-2. They are the fourth highest odds behind the Jets, Buccaneers, Texans, and then Eagles.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying. To me, it comes down to Le'Veon Bell. It comes down to his thought process. And everybody can wake up on a particular morning and change their mind. I just think it's pretty clear from his behavior to this point that he's not taking less money to go somewhere. And if he's not taking less money, it doesn't matter what the Eagles do. They can't get into the conversation with the Jets. They can't do it. They don't have that kind of cap space. And the second part, clearing what they've done, and essentially they'll have a little bit less than $30 million now under the cap. That may sound significant, but they have a lot of plans. It's not just running back. It is receiver. It is safety. It might be linebacker. They might try to bring back Ronald Darby. They might try to bring in an interior defensive lineman. So it's not just Le'Veon Bell. They have a lot of plans in free agency and the draft, and they would need a lot more space to get all of that accomplished. So I think it's unlikely, and I think it has more to do with Le'Veon Bell. And if all of a sudden he wakes up and decides, you know what, I don't want the bag, I don't want the most money in free agency, I want to go play for a Super Bowl contender.
Which by that story, I can't see him sitting out the year to take less. I agree with you there.
Well, exactly. And by that standard, by the way, he was coming from a Super Bowl contender. He sat out because the Steelers, throughout the majority of his time there, were significant Super Bowl contenders. So to me, I don't see how that changes his thinking. I don't see how he changes his thinking. And that's why I don't think the Eagles are essentially going to be in with Le'Veon Bell.
Does Jamie Collins have any interest to you?
No, because...
Do they need a linebacker? What are they going to do with Hicks?
Well, yeah, it depends. They need a linebacker if they don't re-sign Jordan Hicks. It's pretty clear that if Jordan Hicks is going to come back, it's probably going to be on a 1 or a 2 year sort of prove-it deal. Now he's just able to stay healthy. The guy's produced when he's been on the field. He'd be getting a big contract, and that's sort of where you have the loggerheads. Is somebody else going to offer Jordan Hicks 4 or 5 years and roll the dice and say we're not concerned about his injury history, then you're probably going to lose him. But the way the Eagles play defense, I don't think Jamie Collins is a fit. I think he'd be too expensive for how the Eagles set up their salary structure and how they value positions. So I don't think he'd be in the conversation.
Another, semi-big name that was on the market there, Collins, for you. Another guy was Barron from the Rams, but he's been hurt a lot.
Yeah,
but he's an interesting
player because he's a former safety who moved up to linebacker, and that's sort of that new position that has developed over the last 5 years or so with the all the spread offenses in the NFL, and defenses have kind of adjusted by putting a hybrid safety linebacker in there. He's a versatile guy. He's a guy who would interest me because of that reason. He's a unique player that can do a lot of different things, is very versatile. And when he's talking about Jim Schwartz, first word out of his mouth when talking about back seven players is versatility.
Yeah, a lot could still happen, by the way, with your favorite team between now and next Wednesday. A week from today is when free agency opens all over. Legal tampering starts on Monday. What a world, right?
Legal tampering.
That's right.
That's for all us journalists. That's an oxymoron.
Yes.
For the kids out there.
It's like I said this earlier, John, like if for 2 days out of the year they were just like, go ahead, snort cocaine. Go ahead. It's all legal for 2 days only. You do whatever you want.
The Purge. They've done the movie. You can do whatever you want.
Whatever you
want.
Landon Collins, by the way, we talked a little bit about him yesterday. He will be a free agent, and looks like the Giant fans aren't too happy about that. So much going on. By the way, we talked a little bit about Rosen yesterday. Do you think there'll be a big market?
There should be. I mean, if you can get Josh Rosen for a second-round pick, I said a couple of days ago, I said everybody should be interested. Literally every team in this league should be interested because that's a really cost-effective backup on his rookie contract. If you think about what it costs to pay a veteran backup, $5, maybe $6 million now, you're getting a guy on his rookie deal for years 2, 3, and 4 before you get the big spike. So it'd be really, really cost-effective. And for teams that think he's going to be a star and a starter, and there's two in this division, the New York Giants and the Washington Redskins, I'd be on the phone talking about Josh Rosen if he's available.
Number 10 pick of the draft, and he could be available, although Cliff Kingsbury is insisting the Cardinals have not decided on that top pick. We'll see what they end up doing. It is a Sports Bash Live. And this Kyler Murray story, which is bizarre, too. Charlie Cashley coming out saying basically the guy's an idiot.
No, that was harsh. And then you have the story today. I don't know if you saw the story. His height was inflated. I don't know how you do that.
How do you do that?
I don't know how you do that.
What do they have?
I'm trying to figure out.
You know how on the 40s it's a fast clock.
It's a fast. You can.
What do you have a tall measuring stick?
you can go with the hand time. You can go with the fast clock. I can understand that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you inflate somebody's height at the combine. Now, if you're going to pick up the media guide, and the media guide says he's 6'2", and they're lying, yeah, that's fine. But he's at the NFL scouting combine where everybody's there, everybody's getting their height. I don't know how you inflate somebody's height in that environment.
That doesn't sound like it makes any sense.
No, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand. The whole height thing to begin with is bonkers to me. Like, somebody looked at him and said he's 5'7", and he ends up being 5'10". Like, how are you that off? Like, no one looks at me ever and says, you look like you're 5 foot. No one looks at me, John, ever and says, you look like you're 5'10". I never get that.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's certain, and I brought up Kevin Cobb, because Kevin Cobb, to me, I forget what the Eagles listed him at. I think it was 6'2". It might have been 6'3". And I looked at him on the field, and I said, he don't look like he's 6'2" to me. There are certain guys who don't look, maybe it's usually the other way, who don't look as tall as they're claimed to be. But yeah, I mean, if you're 5'7", you're not going to 5'10". But I think 5'10", and I think it's fair to question Kyler Murray on some of that. And you can point to Russell Wilson, and hey, that's great. But remember, he's a third-round pick. And remember, most 5'10" people can't play quarterback in the NFL. So it's a legitimate concern. And the fact that there's one guy who has done it and done it at a really, really high level, that doesn't mean everybody's going to be able to do it.
Yeah,
and the second point is the difference between a third-round pick and number one overall.
No doubt. And we had Scott Wright on earlier in the week about the Combine, who said, a couple of years ago, Murray's a 5th or 6th round guy.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a reason. You would prefer a 6'4" guy playing quarterback. Because history says it's easier for them. That's what you do. That's why you have these measurables. And that's why you look for certain traits, and you have to reach a certain skill set to be a considered an NFL prospect. And most people who are 5'10" can't play quarterback in the NFL. There are exceptions to that rule, as Russell Wilson has already proven.
Michael Vick.
Michael was 6 foot. You can go back to Franz Tarkenton. Drew Brees is just over 6 foot. But again, for every one of those guys, you can point to 100 guys who didn't make it. So that's the other part of it.
All right, a week away. Free agency opens. It should be fun. We'll see how it goes. At JF McMullen for all of the latest on the Eagles restructuring and all that stuff that they're trying to do. Check out 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, pal. We'll talk tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Mike.